All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you all for showing up this morning to officially welcome back Kelly Kroskoff as president of basketball business.
This was not anticipated by anyone. The quiet part was finally said aloud by the Indiana Fever president, who was sat at the top of the entire organization. Her remarks raised eyebrows and stirred up the entire basketball music community. For the first time, the facts of that franchise's music, politics, pressure, locker room dynamics, and the struggle between creating a champion and a brand were made public. Everything you believe to be true about Caitlin Clark's circumstances in Indiana is altered once you learn the full story. Let's now return to the start of this tale. Indiana was one of the least well-known teams in professional basketball prior to Caitlin Clark ever donning a Hoosier uniform. 6 victories in 2021, 5 in 2022, and 13 in 2023 are being discussed. They were a joke for almost 10 years. No alcohol, no fines, and no sports lights. There wouldn't be any cameras. The seats weren't packed. Whatever the fever had been, the WNBA scene had completely changed. That was the truth. A once proud franchise was neglected. But despite their best efforts, nobody in that front office could have anticipated what transpired. When the first overall pick in the 2024 WNBA draft entered the room, everything changed. Caitlin Clark not only lowered the temperature but also altered the league as a whole. Everywhere she played, there were sold-out crowds, record-breaking TV ratings, jerseys flying off the racks, and a media frenzy that, to be honest, had never been seen in women's basketball since music. The company had to make a decision in the midst of that eruption. Would they attempt to change the direction of the wave or ride it? At that moment, the entire tale becomes fascinating because the front office made a move that stunned many people, and the Fever needed someone at the top who realized exactly what they had, a once-in-a-generation athlete who was single-handedly altering what was possible for women's sports. Kelly Kroskoff was appointed as their new president of business operations and basketball. It made sense on paper. Kroskoff had previously created the Fever, was a member of the team that won the 2012 championship, and had first-hand knowledge of the organization. The group introduced her with all the excitement that was expected. However, something in her early statements at the news conference brought up difficulties that many at the time decided to ignore, but that would later come back to destroy the entire company months later. No one noticed the warning signs until it was too late since they were concealed in plain sight. Everything broke down at this point. July of 2025. Caitlin Clark's injury-related absence is causing problems for the Fever. Due to a groin problem that has been bothering her for weeks, Clark has only participated in 11 games this season. Fans are irritated. The team is on the verge of making it to the postseason. There is increasing pressure. On the same day that the video from Kroskoff's first press conference inexplicably resurfaces on social media, the internet unearths a speech from October 2024 that most people had completely missed. During the press conference, Kroskoff looked directly into the cameras and declared, "This is about the Indiana Fever. Indeed, Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston are our key players, and we plan to keep growing them. However, I want this team to become a national leader and a long-lasting brand like Apple." 5 words, like an apple. That was all that was required. Because not many people heard that vision in that cue. In just a few hours, the video went viral, and its fanbase quickly expanded. It served as a caution. At the Fever front office, such a response was unheard of. Fans were not just angry but also well-organized, boisterous, and hard to ignore. Because of what Apple actually accomplished, the comparison to Apple struck a different chord. One visionary, Steve Jobs, was the foundation of their entire identity, and when he left, the company all but fell apart. Clark supporters therefore perceived something in the Fever president's use of that precise analogy as telling, as though the organization already viewed Clark as an element rather than the primary emphasis. A fan responded to enduring brands that align with their values on social media. Steve Jobs, the company's star and visionary, is credited with making Apple a global icon. Another fan didn't hold back either. When Clark eventually decides she's had enough of the front office dumpster fire, the Fever will acknowledge that they wasted the greatest opportunity in women's sports history. The answers, comment sections, and message boards all expressed the same basic sentiment. You don't minimize the most significant person this team has ever had, and you keep focusing on her. There was more to the criticism than just noise. A few hours after the video went viral, Kroskoff's whole account, which had only been active on social media a few days prior, vanished. Someone in that organization made the decision, and they were aware of how dire things were becoming. There was quiet in place of a message or an explanation. The players on the court, the ones who actually suit up next to Caitlin Clark every night, are telling a totally different and far more truthful story than the front staff, who are being demonized online. This is where things become even more confusing. When Lexi Hull, one of Clark's closest friends, applied for a story in Glamour magazine, she had nothing. Although virtually no one in a Fever uniform had previously been willing to reveal, Hull said that everyone in the league already knew. Because of the media attention and the people who have supported us since Caitlin arrived, I believe there is some envy over the Fever. She went one step further and disclosed that teams from all over the league had been publicly discussing things like, "We can't let the Fever win," in their own locker rooms. A disturbing reality that had been developing for 2 seasons was revealed by Hull's remarks. These days, the Fever do more than simply play hoops. Every time they play, opposing teams target them because of a single member of their team rather than the team's performance as a whole. Sophie Cunningham went one step farther. The player who established herself as Clark's enforcer on the floor and made it obvious early on that taking cheap shots at her teammate would have consequences had already come forward and confirmed what the entire league had been speculating about. Even objective onlookers were shocked by the intensity of the hard play directed at Clark by the time her groin injury ended her season after just 13 games, and many were seriously questioning whether the referees had adequately protected her. A growing percentage of people who were listening carefully said that the answer was no. It was only the beginning, though, as the inside story of what it's truly like to be Caitlin Clark's co-worker began to emerge as all of this was happening in the public eye. It was likewise not what the critics had anticipated. The most common accusation made by Caitlin Clark's detractors was that she caused issues in the lavatory. Because no team could handle the stress brought on by the celebrity and attention, the players disliked her. In a September 2024 podcast, Hall of Famer Cheryl Swoops said that important Fever players were subtly expressing their lack of enthusiasm for attending, that the situation surrounding Clark was out of their control, and that it quickly spread. The Fever became part of the background noise as they approached their second season together. Or there was music playing everywhere. Unless, of course, Clark felt obliged to appear as a guest on another March Madness program hosted by Subbard and Diana Taurasi. She faced it head-on. She wasn't upset. She didn't act defensively. She was remarkably composed about it. You essentially grow accustomed to people believing they are aware of what occurs behind closed doors when, in fact, they are not. Music. She continued to receive encouragement from her co-workers in that locker area. During the 2025 playoffs, Clark's teammates flooded the floor once she recovered from her injuries. They ended her interview after the game. They unexpectedly appeared for her. There was a huge celebration in the locker room when the Fever won the Commissioner Cup. When players bonded, laughed, and genuinely supported one another, it didn't read like a performance. This is what the media hasn't yet combined. Caitlin's status was never the main emphasis of the Fever story. She was liked by her teammates. It concerned whether the front office, which was in charge of them all, was prepared to surround her with the required parts and give the project their whole focus. Aaliyah's ties at the court level were genuine, which explains the disparity. Music. Clark and Boston were good friends. Lexi Hull was observed being careful. Before they had even played a game together, Sophie Cunningham and other new players were swooning over Clark. The rookie who made the final roster, Michaela Timpson, respected Clark in a way that is difficult to duplicate. Clark sent comments for 2 of her teammates on Instagram following the expansion draft. "I will always adore you, Cub," for Christy Wallace and Chloe Bibby Way, my Australian. The love was sincere. These were genuine connections, but winning titles requires more than just contacts. And at the center of it all was that tension. In addition to the Apple sound clip, Kelly Krauskopf's remarks at the October 2024 press conference included something that many people overlooked in their haste to express their disapproval. Krauskopf was referring to the long game when she stated that she wanted the Fever to be a lasting brand. When Indiana won its lone championship in 2012, Caitlin Clark was 10 years old, according to her, stating that sometimes a generation is needed to advance. Perhaps the gang had been working for someone else all along, sowing the seeds for a 10-year-old someplace who would find inspiration in what the Fever was doing at the moment. Depending on how you interpret the real priorities of the front office, you may see that as either vision or deception. However, this cannot be disputed. Spectators who were present. Due to a brand, the fever that began in 2024 did not manifest. They arrived as a result of a player. They spent hours at a time behind the wheel. They received monies that the WNBA had never seen before. The league had never anticipated the amount of spectators. Additionally, ticket sales decreased when Clark's injuries prevented him from performing in ways that could be quantified, recorded, and publicly acknowledged. TV viewing declined. There was no denying the hard, unpleasant reality of what Clark meant by it. Franchise. However, the organization's top-level statement repeatedly mentioned the team, the institution, and the brand, as though the person garnering all of that attention was somehow apart from it. Kroskoff made a particularly notable statement during that press conference. "You would want to play with Caitlin Clark if you're a smart basketball player and you see how she plays," she added. And the Fever's recruitment success had subtly developed into one of the WNBA's most compelling stories, so it turned out to be more true than even she probably realized at the time. In order to travel to Indiana, players had to accept wage reductions. The chance to play alongside Clark was the deciding factor for veterans. There were other locations where Clark's fan following was present besides crowded stadiums. Players wanted to be a part of something greater than a typical WNBA season because of the atmosphere it was fostering. The Fever had grown to be one of the league's most well-liked venues in spite of this. Not because of a brand plan, but rather because of a basketball player who packed buildings wherever she went and improved everyone around her. Now let's discuss 2026 and the Fever's upcoming projects. In the WNBA, the team lost 2 players. Christy Wallace is drafted to Toronto, and Chloe Bibby White is drafted to Portland. Clark herself had to endure a season that was supposed to be her breakthrough second year, but instead it was a nightmare of injuries that kept her to just 13 games in the regular season. She was chosen for the All-Star game despite averaging 16.5 points, 8.5 assists, and 5 rebounds per game. Notwithstanding this, she remained the league's focus notwithstanding.